folks out in the country are obsessing about. We're still in the middle of a war.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2, higher and then much higher taxes. 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. 4, wild inflation of our currency. 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare, the beauties and the absolute necessity of peace. Peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.
Thomas Jefferson lives. He's Ron Paul. If Jefferson lived today, he would rail about the Federal Reserve. He wouldn't like that. He'd be appalled by our ongoing wars, our nonstop wars. Jefferson said, the less you use power, the greater it becomes. Compared to Ron Paul said, you sacrifice liberty for security, you lose both.
In 2008, when they bailed out the banks once and again, they should have set the ground to remove that problem. They did not. The banks today have hijacked the government. It's like inverse of what the French did. They socialized the banks in 1981. Well, here it's like the banks took over the government in the U.S.
President Bush actually claimed that he had to destroy the free market in order to save it. Before TARP, President Bush had given away $300 billion. And since TARP, President Obama has given away $1 trillion. Last week, he announced he wants to give away another $500 billion. The federal government is one of limited powers defined in the Constitution. Nowhere among them is the power to take tax dollars or to borrow money which the taxpayers must repay and give it or lend it to anyone.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that.
Good. And what do you do, Roger?
I'm a financial consultant.
Ah, financial consultant. And how are Germany, France and Britain going, Roger?
Well, they're struggling a bit, aren't they?
Correct. Why?
Because they've lent all these vast amounts of money to other European economies that can't possibly pay them back.
Correct. So what are they going to do?
They're going to have to bail them out.
Correct. Where are they getting the money to do that, Roger?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
How much does Portugal owe?
Hang on a minute. What was the answer to that earlier question?
Just keep answering the questions, Roger. Where is Portugal going to get the money it owes to Germany if Germany can't get back the money that it lent to Italy?
Just a minute. What was the answer to the previous question? The question was, how can broke economies lend money to other broke economies who haven't got any money because they can't pay back the money the broke economy lent to the other broke economy and shouldn't have lent it to them in the first place because the broke broke economy can't pay it back.
You're wasting very valuable time, Roger. How much money does Spain owe to Italy?
$41 billion, but where are they going to get it?
Correct. What does Italy owe to Spain?
$27 billion, but they haven't got it, they're broke.
Correct. How can they pay each other if neither of them has any money?
They're going to get a bailout, aren't they?
Correct. And where's the money coming from for the bailout?
That's what I'm asking you.
Correct. Why are people selling the European currency and buying the US dollar?
Because the US economy is so much stronger than the European economy.
Correct. Why is that, Roger?
Because it's owned by China.
Correct.
All right, as investors, let's get to the money angle of this, the investment angle. As they struggle to get ahead of a slowing global economy and tumultuous financial markets, our next guest says this is all just the opening act to a financial catastrophe that will make 2008 pale in comparison, David?
Mark Faber is editor-publisher of the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report. He joins us now on the phone from Hong Kong in a Fox Business exclusive. Mark, great to talk to you. You say that a big one is coming. How big, and what is it going to be?
Well, it's going to be huge, but we don't know when, because the central banks around the world, they're going to print and print and print.
The Greeks just can't pay the goddamn money back, and Europe is
Yes,
a huge issue.
Look, Fred, I like him. He's a nice man. He's an economist. He's right. The Greeks, they cannot pay. But lots of people in the U.S. can't pay either. Most banks worldwide are bankrupt. Bankrupt because if they had to the market their assets, there would be no capital left. And that's reflected in the new lows of bank stocks today. A lot of banks have made new lows, but the market somehow is going down because it's discounting a very bad event. I don't know what the event is. I think the world is caught in a U.S. where, as Fred mentioned, there is not a lot of inflationary pressures on consumer goods, but energy prices are up, food prices are up. Now, with zero interest rates, you know what will happen to your insurance premiums? They'll go up dramatically because the insurance can't earn any money on their investments. So there
all right,
will
well,
be
Mark, let me just ask you about the interventions, because despite the fact that governments have run out of money, they continually try to intervene in preventing disasters, whether it's in the housing market or the banking market or whatever. What happens if there's enough political pressure on those governments? It's happening here in the United States, not so much overseas, but it's beginning to overseas as well. If the public demands that they stop with the bailouts, what will happen then?
Well, the best would be that there would be no government intervention. But it's gone so far that to reduce the intervention and to lower the deficit will cause temporary pain. And believe me, we're not talking about economics here. We're talking about an election. And Mr. Obama, he wants to get re-elected. And he'll do anything to get the vote. And to get votes, you have to hand out things. So for the next, say, 12 months, on the fiscal restraint, nothing will happen. Afterwards, who knows? If he's re-elected, it will continue handouts, handouts, handouts. If he's not re-elected, who knows what the next president will do.
Presidential candidate Ron Paul got some star power this weekend when actor Vince Vaughn introduced him at a rally in Reno, Nevada. This as the congressman beat out his colleagues in the latest Republican straw poll in California.
Go ahead, Dr. Hellman. What do you think? Are you a fan or foe of Ron Paul? Let me ask you this. Is he more Democrat or more Republican?
Well, he's a libertarian, so he overlaps with both, and he's very ideologically driven, which I respect him for. But a lot of his views look like they're far left because he wants less government intrusion in our lives. He's a supporter of civil liberties, and when you look at it through that lens, his issue positions make perfect sense.
Hey, let me go to Chris. Chris,
Brian Burrows, Aiken, South Carolina. Bill, your bias against Ron Paul is shameful. No bias here, Brian. We've covered the congressman accurately.
So I grabbed the bear by the throat, looked him right in the eyes, and I said, "Bear, you have till the count of 0 to put some pants on and apologize to the president."